Hello and welcome to Films and Fandoms with Kaylee. Before I get into this episode, NAFCO would like to thank its sponsors, West PA Systems, the electrical design build contractor for your 21st century home and business, and Dakota, the DuBois Area Council on the Arts. So in this episode, I am going to be talking about the first episode of Disney's new Marvel TV show, Moon Knight, called The Goldfish Problem, starring Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke. Now, as I said, the first episode is called The Goldfish Problem, and it's directed by Mohamed Diab. And if I'm pronouncing any names wrong, I apologize. And the writers are Jeremy Slater, Danielle, Iman, Doug Moench, and Don Perlin. And the summary for this episode is Stephen Grant learns that he may be a superhero but also share a body with the ruthless mercenary. Now, just some quick things before I get into more of the nitty-gritty of this episode. I absolutely love Moon Knight, and I can't wait to see more. Alright, now to the episode. So, I really love this opening because it's so much different than I think we've seen in the other Marvel TV shows we've seen on Disney Plus. Because, it opens up with just Ethan Hawke's character, Arthur Harrow, drinking something from a clear liquid out of a glass, and then covering it with cloth, breaking it with the hammer, and then putting the glass in his shoes, and then walking with the glass in the shoes with the cane. And that was my signal that this wasn't going to be the normal show, because it's definitely kind of a lot different. And also just the music that was playing during that was awesome, and it added to the whole what the hell is going on here moment. And also, what I'm about to say next is a slight spoiler for Spider-Man No Way Home. So, actually it's a major spoiler, but just tune away if you haven't seen that movie yet. But in the Marvel logo, Spider-Man I saw wasn't in it, and that's 'cause in No Way Home everyone forgets who he is. So it's kind of sad, but it's cool that they kind of kept that consistency. And you gotta admit, you kind of feel bad for Stephen Grant, because he wakes up, he removes his he removes the blanket, and it's just, he's just shackled to the bed, and you can tell he's he's still tired, and then checking the tape, and then but Oscar Isaac is just adorable though as Stephen Grant, because he's feeding his goldfish and he's calling his mom, and he's just showing that he's a normal Monday guy with this song in the background, which I literally just heard a clip of it when I was scrolling through TikTok before I made this, and now I can't remember what the name of the song was, but the only bit I really remember is "Every day I wake up." I just really like that, and I also like that it works in a museum, because I love ancient history, and I love the mythology that comes with that history. So this movie was or this show, I guess it's not a movie, but this show was perfect for me for that reason. And I also thought it was adorable that he was scolding a young girl for putting her, I think it was gum or something, on the pyramid model, and then he's explaining the mummification process, which he's which is like literally like heating up this like a metal stick and then removing the brains through like the nose. It's kind of gross. So, and then like they took out all the organs, but they kept your heart in the chest so it would be weighed in the afterlife, which I'm gonna get into that more later because that's a huge part of this episode and how it all connects. But also, it's a fun fact about mummification. The organs are put in these jars called canopic jars, and there's duomotif, I think is how you say that name. Again, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing any of these names. Egyptian is not my native language, so yeah. Anyways, duomotif is the jackal-headed god representing the east, whose jar contained the stomach and was protected by the goddess Neith. Seti is the human-headed god representing the south, whose jar contained the liver and was protected by the goddess Isis. Quebesenuf is the falcon-headed god representing the west, whose jar contained the intestines and was protected by the goddess Circuit. And Habi is the baboon-headed god representing the north, whose jar contained the lungs and was protected by the goddess Nephesis. And but also in the afterlife, this is kind of is explained throughout the whole episode, is that in the afterlife it was believed the heart would be weighed against the feather of Mat, or truth, by the god Anubis. And if it was too heavy from bad deeds, it would be fed to a monster, Amet, and that was believed to be part lion, part hippo, and part crocodile. And also Anubis is depicted with a cane and a canine head. And that comes into play later, and I'll get into that when I get further on in the episode. But then when like Steven goes into the museum and he's just bitched at by Donna for being late, but he's just so charming about it though. Steven's so kind of adorable about it though. It's like, yeah, lovely chatting with you. So Donna is a bit of a bitch about the whole like inventory thing. And then him talking with the woman about their date. He's like so excited for this date though. And also Stephen would be me nitpicking the banner because it's missing two of the Ennead gods. Now I would absolutely sit down and talk to him about it because he's so freaking adorable about it, and I do the same thing, as my mother will attest to. So I just thought that was really adorable to just kind of like show he has that, to show that he has some knowledge of sort of what's happening in this series, at least in terms of like the history behind it and like what each thing represents. And also the Steven with the V. And that's funny because when I was making my notes on this, I kept spelling Steven S-T-E-P-H-E-N. So, and I also like how he's like talking to the street performer about like how he's like feels like he's awake, but then he like just wakes up somewhere else, like he was awake but he had to get in like 1,000 steps first or something like that. Like, which, I mean, if that helps him, I mean, he's not really hurting nothing. I mean, just sitting there talking, eating his sandwich or whatever he was eating. So, and he tipped the guy, so I guess you can't really complain about that. And also agreeing to take that picture for the couple, then making sure that like they tipped the guy. But then the reaction to this line. And if I'm gonna have a girlfriend at some point, I obviously can't have ankle restraints on my bed, can I? That poor performer got way much more than he bargained for with that, I must say. But at least he tipped. That's the important thing. Always tip. And I also like this next bit here where you get the reflections of the water, and then as he's like walking away after he tipped, you see him walking away through the reflection in the water. So there's that, like, the motif of the reflections. And then also having, like, the salt on the floor, which salt, at least there's kind of two things that come up with the salt in my head. The first one being an actual thing is that part of the mummification process in Egyptian history, how they would mummify people is by putting the body in salt. And then after they put the body in salt, they'd wrap it, which I think is going to come into play in like another episode based on the trailer. But also the second thing is probably not based in real thing, and it's from Supernatural, because salt is how they keep the demons away. And ghosts. Well, mostly ghosts is how they keep the salt away. Or salt's how they keep the demons away. Yeah. And then, like, the montage with the meditation about staying awake. And just the music getting increasingly more, using the strings to add the chaos. And to make you like, oh god, like he's spiraling out of control. And then him freaking waking up in the pasture in the middle of nowhere with his jaw out of place. And then him just like fixing it grossed me out, because I can deal with like blood and swearing in movies and that, but I cannot do with the sound of cracking bones. I don't know why. Just the sound of cracking bones grosses me out. So that grossed me out. And then the voice, which I think, due to the reveal later, is actually Moon Knight's voice, but just making fun of him, like, oh, the idiot's awake. And then revealing the scarab, which I'll get more into that later. And he's just like waving at the guy at the tower, like, hi. And then there's another guy and just gets shot at. And he runs. And actually he's smart, like trying to like make himself small, running in zigzags to make him harder to hit, blending into the crowd. Kinda, he just basically puts his hood up, which, I mean, it works every other time, so. But it's interesting that when Arthur comes down, who's, as I said earlier, is being played by Ethan Hawke, and all the people of this village kind of part the ways, and he's using the cane to judge someone, like asking for a volunteer to be like judged first. And you can see the tattoo moving, because he has the tattoo on his arm of the, I want to say scales of justice, but I don't think that's the right term for it. I think it's just the scales. But basically the scales is like weighing someone's heart against the feather of truth, as I'll go into more a bit later. And the tattoo turned green, so the guy was good. And then the woman who, like, is like, I've been good all my life, like, I must know. And, like, it turns out she's going to do something bad, and then she just disappears. No, just dies. Not disappear, just dies. And then the goons tell Arthur that the exchange went wrong, and someone killed 2 of their men, and they to find Stephen. Arthur says some ancient Egyptian, and no, I do not know what it translates to. And then everyone to like nail it down except for Stephen. He's like, oh, bullocks. Like, oh crap, I've just been made. And Arthur calls him out, and he's like, Steven's like, hey, oh yeah. I love his accent, I don't know why. And then Arthur's like, mercenary. Steven's like, no. Like, no, my name's Arthur Grant. Or Steven Grant. And I work at a gift shop. Like, Steven! No! That's the first rule of the script. You don't tell anyone your real name and occupation. No, I say that, but then never mind. Then you hear that male voice again. He's like taking control of Steven and like, don't give up the scarab. And Steven's like, I'm trying to give up the scarab, but I can't. Because... And then like then you get like the flashes again, or they get the flashes, which I find interesting. Like his eyes kind of roll back a bit, and it flashes, and he just wakes up to just bloody dead bodies. And that was like the second clue that like, oh, this isn't your normal Disney Plus Marvel show, because there's like not usually a lot of blood on those shows. The only exception being the shows that were on Netflix that recently got transferred over to Disney Plus. But because like Steven's hand's just covered in blood holding the scarab, and like the scarab's covered in blood. And just this chase is actually a pretty decent chase scene, I thought. And Steven steals a cupcake truck. And then the voice is like, don't drop the scarab. So I thought that was kind of funny. And then Wake Me Up Before You Go by Wham playing as Steven's driving up the mountain. And then he's like honking at the driver to get out of the way. And then she flips him off as he drives by. He's like, oh, charming. Okay, I thought that was funny again. And then stunt work here. Now, shout out to all the stunt people of the world. Y'all are the real MVPs of the movie industry. Because without you, actors wouldn't be able to stay safe while filming. So, shout out to all the stunt guys out there. Or stunt people, I guess I should say. And smashing the freaking cupcake in the goon's face. And you get like the flashes again. And it's like, wakes back up, driving. Guy's freaking dead, covered in cupcake in the back. And he's holding the gun. He's like, ah! Dropping the freaking gun. And then, and the voice is like, truck. And, Steven nearly gets run over. We get more flashes, and now he's driving backwards, and then he freaking tosses the gun. And it's funny as the voice is like, did he just toss the gun? So, I just thought that was a funny thing of humor there. And then the stuff starts falling, and because the truck doesn't work, so it saves Steven. But then like he wakes up in his bed and he's like, I thank God that was actually real. Because like his like he still like has his ankle restraint on, like none of the tape isn't off the door. So he was like relieved a bit, and then every day I wake up, back to that. It was funny. It's like talking to Gus, and he's like, I wonder what fishies dream about. And then he's like, then he realizes that the fish has two fins instead of one. But what's funny is you see Steven look at the fish, and he's like, what the? And then it cuts to him at the pet store, like, fish. The poor pet store owner, or the pet store worker, revealing that, like, she saw him yesterday, because Steven's, like, insistent that the thing grew back, and of course Steven's confused, because he's like, I wasn't at the pet shop yesterday. The one thing I'm, like, a little upset about, and this is just a general thing throughout, like, the whole series, is it is very obvious that Steven is not doing okay at all. But no one's asking him, like, hey, like, you okay, mate? Like, no one's asking him if he's okay. Then he's like, oh crap, I got a date. And then he's all cute, dressing up for the date. Like, because he wants to look nice. And then, like, he goes to the restaurant and he's like, it's not looking good. And so he calls, and it turns out that he's 2 days late to the date because he was in the Alps for 2 days. And I felt so bad for Steven, because he was, like, genuinely excited for this date. The woman could have been a bit, like, nicer about it. She was just kind of mean about it, I thought. Maybe that's just me. And then Steven ordered steak, but not knowing how to order it because he's vegan. Though I will applaud the etiquette of this server here, though I'm a little disappointed that he gave Steven a well done steak. Cause no, well done. That's not how you do steak. And he bought her flowers and chocolates, and he's calling his mom. And then he's eating his feelings in his apartment. And then he proceeds to put sprinkles in Gus's fish tank, which I'm pretty sure is not good. And it's funny, he's looking at the fish and he's like, yo, Gus, I'm the bloody queen of Shiva. Which I love. But then he's like, sees the scratches on the floor, which reveal that the table was moved. And he finds a phone in the ceiling, along with this set of keys. With a key attached to a keychain that has like a U symbol thing on it. And he's looking through like the contacts, and he sees there's like a whole bunch of this person Layla kept calling him, and then there's one called Duncamp. Now, I have not read the Marvel comics. Now, I love the MCU movies. I love Marvel movies. I haven't read the comics. I just haven't. So, I'm not familiar with exactly who Duncamp is. So, that's kind of also the disclaimer, is if I say something that's like answered in a comic, don't yell at me. Because I'm doing this purely from a film analytic perspective here. And which Steven does kind of do a smart thing and like call Layla, and she's concerned, like where the hell have you been? Like, I've tried contacting you. And, like, Steven's just like, hello? She's like, hello? I don't hear from you for months, and that's all you have to say. Because she's both concerned and pissed at him. And then he's like, wait, who do you think I am? And then it's like, what are you talking about? Like, what's going on, Mark? And he's like, why did you call me Mark? And Leo's like, what's going on? And then hangs up the phone. And poor Steven's just so confused because he doesn't know who Mark is. And he doesn't know, like, what's going on. And then, like, the male voice there again is telling Steven to stop. And we have the motif again, mirrors and reflections from the bathroom mirror. And then we see electricity buzzing. And the voice again is, like, warning him not to look. Warning him to stop looking. And then it goes into shaky cam a bit to make it, the shaky cam usually symbolizes chaos, so the fact that they're using the shaky cam to to show that, like, it looks like the building collapsed, and so Steven runs to an elevator, which probably should have gone for the stairs if you thought the place was collapsing. But then again, he might not have thought the building was collapsing. He could have just thought something was happening with the electricity. I don't know. But then you see this figure in the hall, and I'll get into that in a second. We get more eerie music, and then this is kind of funny. But then, like, the figure, like, comes to the elevator, and then it just reveals to be an old woman. And Steven's just huddled in the corner, terrified, and so is the woman. Like, they're both freaking scared of the other because she's like, get me the hell off this elevator. Like, I need to get out of here, away from this man. And Steven's like, I don't know what's happening. But you have a good day. And then we see the figure again. Which, the person looks like, or the figure, it looks like they're wearing a Hawke mask figure. Which, because it has like a long curved beak kind of thing. So, I looked it up a bit because that's me. So, I have a theory. Now, I don't know if this is true or not. Again, if this is a comic answer or something answered in the comics or something I would know if I read the comics, don't hate me because I don't know it. But I think the figure that Steven was seeing is the Egyptian god Thoth, who's the god of writing, magic, wisdom, and the moon. And who also teams up with Osiris and was called upon by souls who feared being judged in the Hall of Truth. It was self-created or born, depending on the story, from the seed of Horus, who is the sky god and the forehead of Set, the god of chaos. So he represents like an equilibrium. So how that kind of ties in is at the beginning when Steven's at the museum, he's talking to that little girl, and they both ask, or they're kind of talking about this Hall of Truth, which is where souls go after they die to get judged using the scales and weighed against the feather of Mott, or the feather of truth, which weighs your heart again, which weighs your heart. So, my kind of theory is that that's somehow maybe Mark is dead and was resurrected by this moon god that's being possessed by him. And if that is answered in the comics, then I think this is just something that is like, not only are they setting that up, but it could be just another piece of evidence to suggest that is that figure and then that story of the Hall of Truth. Yeah. Then he wakes up screaming on the bus. Which, I mean, who hasn't done that? And then he sees the figure again, and he gets off, and he's like, oh crap, because he sees Arthur's also on the bus. And JB, the security guard, is being a bit of a dick to Steven. He is, like, genuinely scared. Which should tell you something if you see someone who's, like, genuinely scared and, like, thinks they're in danger. Like, like, even if they, like, all signs are telling you otherwise, you should still, like, it's hard to fake fear. So, like, if someone comes to you and they're genuinely scared, or they, like, look scared, they probably are, no matter how crazy their story will be. Because every story is based in truth of some fact. And, yeah, in the absence of truth, that's where stories come from. So. And Donna, once again being a bitch to Steven, trying to get him to, like, do inventory or whatever. And then Steven finding Arthur Harrow again. And them meeting by the Egyptian exhibit near some pillars. Saying he thought Stephen Grant was an alias, but he really did work there. And Ronnie, the security guard, revealing he's a part of the cult, part of Arthur's cult. I don't know what it's actually called, but when I was doing some research after rewatching the episode, there was an actual cult of Anubis, and I'll get a bit more into that later. My whole theory with that. And Steven's like, I don't have your bloody beetle, mate. And Arthur's like, oh, it isn't mine, it's Ahmed's. Do you know her? And Ahmed's an Egyptian monster that basically would eat the souls who were bad. This is what it is. And Steven says he doesn't know her personally, but she was the world's first bogeyman. Or boogeyman. And Arthur explains that she was only the boogeyman for evildoers who grew weary of people committing sin, so she wanted to stop it before it happened. And Arthur uses the analogy, would you eat a garden till after the roses were dead? Which is kind of, if you use that analogy, yeah, you don't want your roses to die, so you weed the garden and you take care of the garden. But I'm not sure how that analogy applies to something like sins, because that's a whole can of worms and a whole different conversation that would not work for this podcast. So, yeah, and Arthur continues saying that Ahmed looks at the past, present, and future to judge someone. And Steven kind of gets cornered, and then by another woman who reveals the tattoo. And Arthur says that if Ahmed had been free, she would have prevented Hitler and, like, all these bad people. And he specifically says Nero, the Armenian genocide, and Pol Pot. Now, I did some Googling. Most of what I got here comes from Wikipedia. So Nero was the 5th Roman emperor who had his mother killed for power and was a tyrant. The Armenian genocide, well, that it's kind of self-explanatory, but it happened during World War I. And I don't mean self-explanatory in a bad way. It literally was a genocide of Armenians. So it's kind of in the name. And Pol Pot was a leader of Cambodia from 1975 to 1979 and also committed genocide. And as Steven points out, they're bad people. And Arthur continues saying that Amma was portrayed by indolent fellow gods by her own avatar, which causes a cheeky reference to both Avatar, the James Cameron movie, and Avatar, The Last Airbender, from Steven. And Arthur's like, stop it. Like, quit being a smart-ass, Steven. And Steven's like, are you gonna kill me? And you see the electricity buzzing again, because it goes on and off. off and on. Arthur's then like, it's maddening, isn't it? Isn't it? The voice in your head, relentless, forever unsatisfied, no matter how hard you try to please it, it devours you until there's nothing left but a hollow shell, and the more you ask for help, the more you sound like the boy who cried wolf. Which, basically, boy who cried wolf is a saying from a fable where there was a boy who basically said that there was a wolf constantly trying to attack his sheep, and that he said it so often that no one was believing him until there was an actual wolf in the garden or in the pasture or whatever. That's the abridged version. Anyways, then he like rolls up his sleeves a bit to reveal the tattoo and puts the cane on Stephen. Seems like, I can't help you, and Arthur's like, I'm trying to help you. And Stephen tells him he saw Arthur kill that woman in the Alps, and Arthur's like, I only told her what millions more will soon learn. Do you want to know the truth? Arthur puts the cane on Stephen's wrists, and the scales are inconclusive. Like, they just keep going and going and going and going. And that's because Stephen has chaos inside of him. And the door opens and Stephen books it. And Arthur orders his people to let him go. So he's closing up the museum. It's dark out. Lights are going off. Stephen's scanning things. Stephen hears a dog squealing. And there's a lone janitor. He's calling for it like a freaking idiot. Like, you didn't, like, book it out of there. Like, you had this encounter. You're in a museum. Like, I know I say I love museums, and I want to work at a museum one day. But you hear noises in the museum late at night, you freaking book it out. You don't freaking start calling at the noise like it's a freaking dog. You don't do that. And we also get more reflections that actually, we get 3 total images. But when Stephen moves, we see 2 more images that stay behind a bit longer than the other ones. And we get more eerie music, because what better way to build attention than with eerie music. And I think it's a werewolf that goes to attack Stephen, but it might not be. Again, I don't know. It's a canine thing. That's all I know. And scary. And at least Stephen does this smart thing and try and hide behind a mantle. And Arthur comes over like the PA system. Like Stephen Grant at the gift shop. Hand over the scarab and you won't get hurt. Which Stephen actually does a smart thing, and he tosses his bag to so the werewolf goes, I think it's a werewolf. I'm just gonna call it a werewolf. So he throws the bag, which I thought was kind of smart. But he nearly knocks the vase over. And we get a chase, which leads to a bathroom. Pretty sure it's the men's room, but honestly, I cannot tell you because I did not see a sign. And there's no real evidence to suggest it's otherwise. So, pretty sure it's the men's bathroom. But it might just be a regular bathroom, too. And we hear Mark's voice calling to Stephen, like trying to get him to calm down and saying he could save them. And we once again get the mirrors motif of like the mirrors showing like what's actually happening. I use that in quotations. And Stephen's of course flipping out, because why wouldn't you? And Mark, you see like the difference with Mark in the mirror and then Steven. It's like, look at me. Like, that's real. That thing coming in's real. And we can, like, I can save us. But you have to give me control and I can't have you fighting me. And then Steven does give up control. And you can kind of see the hieroglyphs flashing. And I could not tell you what those hieroglyphs were and if they mean anything because they aren't on screen long enough. And I could not tell you the first thing about translating hieroglyphs. So I'm just going to leave that as it is. And then, like, you get a cut to the outside and you just hear, like, the aftermath of a fight. Like, a sink goes flying and ceramic all over the floor. And then you pan inside the bathroom. Or the restroom, and you see Moon Knight, and I absolutely love the costume design for Moon Knight. And it comes to the camera and roll credits. So, I love the pacing of this. Like, I didn't think it was too fast. I mean, it kind of started off a bit slow, but, I mean, you have to have some exposition a bit, but I think a good way to show that exposition was sort of just the showing the everyday Monday kind of man of Steven. And just how he's, like, reacting to the world around him and what that says about his character. And, like, building that relationship to the audience. Like, oh, I kind of like this guy. Like, he's someone I would want to just sit and have coffee with and listen to him talk about Ancient Egypt. But it also may be because he looks like Oscar Isaac. So, I don't know. But, honestly, I thought that just that whole idea of, like, the not knowing, like, and, like, purposefully being hidden, certain things being hidden from the audience as, like, a red herring, kinda, a bit. Alright, so some final thoughts. So I absolutely love the costume design for Moon Knight. Because it looks like a bunch of, like, white wrapping. Like a mummy. And then the hood with the crescent on it. And the mask, I thought that was interesting. And I love the idea of the whole reflections and mirrors motif that's shown throughout, because mirrors symbolize when, like, reality is broken, or, like, something like psyche's broken or something like that. It's to symbolize that a character has a break of some kind. And also mirrors reveal sort of like your true self. Like, in lore, like, vampires can't see their reflection in the mirror because they're not alive. So, now we've seen, obviously, Steven's reflection in the mirror, but we don't actually see Mark. We only see him in the mirror, symbolizing that he might not be alive. Which, if I remember reading about the comics, that's kind of the point. Or that's, like, how kind of Mark got his power. Is he died but was resurrected by the moon god Khonshu, I think is how you say its name. I'm probably butchering that. Again, I apologize if I'm butchering any names. I also kind of like how Moon Knight breaks the Marvel trope of all the bad things happen in New York, because the last shows have, not just the last shows in general, but also just a lot of the movies recently have been set in New York. Like Hawkeye was set in New York City. Spider-Man No Way Home was set in Queens. You have like upstate New York for both Endgame and Infinity War. You have also New York for like Doctor Strange, and like now WandaVision was set in New Jersey, and Loki, that's a whole separate thing, but a lot of what happens in Marvel is set in some place in New York or New York City. So the fact that Moon Knight is set in London, I like, because it's a different atmosphere and you get different reactions with people because it's a different environment and different culture within that. Because every place has its own culture and reactions to events. So, and also something I want to point out, and I think this is something that's going to have to be addressed in later MCU projects, especially with the long lineup we're about to have, especially with like new characters and like the aftermath of the different events that have led up to the phase 4. I think the big problem that the MCU is having and is going to have is that there's just so much content. And what I mean by that is, like, you see the trailer for I'm just pulling one of the movies. Say you saw the trailer for Black Widow. Okay. Like, it looks like, you like Black Widow because you're interested in it. So you look up what you have to watch before watching Black Widow. And you have to watch Avengers, Captain America. You have to find out you have to watch all these movies to lead up to that specific moment. Or like Endgame. Like if you saw like the Infinity War trailer and you go into the MCU blind and you're like, oh, that looks really epic, like all these characters put together. And then you go to Google and look up what movies you have to watch before watching Infinity War, and then you realize you have to watch 10 years worth of content to even understand what's going on and like how do we get here. And what I do like about Moon Knight is, so far, now granted I haven't seen the second episode yet, it is out when I record this. I haven't seen it yet. I'm going to watch it before I do the next episode for this. But I like how Moon Knight doesn't tie into the other MCU projects. Now, I don't know if that was a purpose choice. Now, here's like what I think Marvel could do to prevent the issue and to draw in a new generation of fans is sort of have phase 4 be like the reset. And what I mean by that is have introduced these new characters that are like the legacy of the original 6, but have their storylines not intersect with anything that actually has happened so far. Because, let's be honest, there's a lot of MCU content out there, and I mean, there's like over a decade worth of movies in that. So I think it would just be cool to not like be constantly reminded of the things that happened, because Hawkeye had this problem. Now granted, it was a lot of what the idea what the show was about, but like Hawkeye kept talking about Natasha's death. Like almost every single episode, some character mentioned Natasha's dying or Natasha's death. And now granted, that was the point because Hawkeye is going through imposter syndrome and a lot of survivor's guilt, but that's a whole different thing and not what we're here to talk about. We're talking about Midnight. So yeah. And also I love how just lovable Steven is. As I said, he just like, he's someone you'd want to have like a coffee with and just listen to him talk about Egyptian mythology and stuff. Egyptian history, that too. And though I'm gonna be a little sad if it's revealed that Gus died in like some fight that happened in Steven's apartment, which is why he had to get replaced. Though I'm not sure who Layla and Duncamp are. Or this is sort of some questions I have after, is who's Layla and Duncamp. Now I'm pretty sure this is going to be answered in the next episode, and it's probably answered in the comics. Again, don't hate on me for not knowing the comics, because I don't read them. It's just a personal thing. If I read the comics, great. Just not my thing, but I love reading about what happens in the comics and the different comic storylines. So, yeah. And also, I wonder, another question I have is, why is this scarab so important? Now, again, this is something I googled, is that a scarab represents death, rebirth, and guidance in the afterlife, and also can be used as protection from evil. That more evidence into the whole Mark is dead, and that's why he is possessed by this Egyptian moon god. Though I'm not sure where Steven comes from yet, or what exactly caused that. And granted, you might not know. I mean, Mark I know in the comics, Mark Spector does have dissociative identity disorder, or DID. And that is usually when a split happens, it usually happens from some sort of trauma. Or it could be something with that, or it could be something to do with Mark getting possessed by the moon god and by Moon Knight. Or by Khonshu. I mean, which granted would be tragic and traumatic. So, maybe it has something to do with that. I'm not entirely sure. But some more kind of connections I made as I was doing more research about Egyptian mythology to kind of refresh my memory. Anubis is also known as a keeper of secrets, and he who is upon the sacred mountain, and a guide of souls. Now, I don't know exactly what happens, or like how Arthur's connected to Anubis, but there's got to be some connection there, because they both have canes, and Arthur's guiding people and judging them. Or he's not the one doing the judging, he's leading them to be judged. And he's also guiding, and he's also the one that's sort of keeping secrets too. And he was upon this sacred mountain and a guide of souls. Where do we find Arthur? In the Alps. And guiding souls. That's what Arthur says he wants to help with Stephen. Is he wants to help him. So that's what Mohamed would do. Would devour heavy souls. So there's got to be some connection there between Arthur and Anubis. I don't know if Arthur could be like a reincarnate of Anubis in human form. Because that is something that would happen, and we hear about avatars in this. Or at the scene between Arthur and Stephen in the museum, when Arthur tells Stephen that Amit was betrayed by her avatar. So it's like Arthur Anubis's avatar, which is why he has the tattoo. And that would be interesting. And also, I like the fact that they used the flashes to hide the fighting. I thought that was pretty interesting as well. And also, I think the cane represents something called a was scepter. Sorry. Being the was scepter, which is wielded by kings and also represented Set, the god of chaos. So, because before Arthur does his first reading of the guy, he says, "What a beautiful day. It feels like heaven, but it's not heaven. There's a darkness surrounding us." And he's also the one who tells Stephen, "You have chaos in you." Or there's chaos in you. So that cane that Arthur has could be the was scepter. And Arthur could have some connection to Anubis. Again, if this is something that's in the comics and I don't know about it, don't let me know. I don't want to get real spoiled. So, yeah. And so that is actually all my notes. Or most of my notes. And I just hate how Donna was mean to Stephen. Because Stephen's adorable and deserves to be treated with kindness, as do we all. Or as we all do. So I'm going to end my discussion there. I'm super excited to get into the second episode, and I'm super excited to continue the series. So thank you so much for listening. To learn more about oh my god. No. Alright, thank you for listening. To learn more about NAFCO, you can head over to nafco.org and follow us on our socials, which are all linked on the website, and you can learn more about our sponsors there. I will also be linking in the episode description my own personal website where you can not only check out what I'm doing, but you can also link to my socials where you can get in contact with me if you want to suggest any movies, film, or TV shows you want me to review and rant about. So, yeah. Next episode, I will be going into the second episode of Moon Knight. And, yeah, so go check out nafco.org, which will be linked in the episode description as well. Go ahead and check out my website, also linked in the episode description. Make sure to go ahead and follow this podcast to get notifications whenever I upload an episode. And If you want to support NAFCO, you can go ahead and go on nafco.org, where there is a link to donate if you want to not only support this podcast, but support a wonderful group that really is trying to spread the networking for the arts in small towns in the Northern Appalachian area. And I honestly would not be doing this right now if it wasn't for them and for my mom, who convinced me to do this. So thank you for giving me the option to do this. And I also want to thank the host of Let's Go Steal a Podcast, Christina, for getting me into podcasting, because I had a lot of fun on her podcast. If you want to check it out, I was on some episodes, and I will be in some in the future if you like leverage, which that will be another episode coming up, and I'll have a guest on for that. So yeah, thank you so much. Remember to follow the podcast to get notifications when the next episode comes. Stay tuned, and I'll see you all in the next episode. Well, I guess you'll hear me in the next episode. Bye-bye.